Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alumni Career Talks webinar on breaking into consulting, and hope you all are well. I wanted to conduct a quick check-in to see if you can hear me. So if you can hear me, please type yes into the chat box, just so I know that you all can hear me. Okay, so we got some yeses. Great. Perfect. So my name is Michelle Levy, and I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Business Career Services at Cal State Long Beach. And GBCS offers a wide range of services to aid in students' career and professional development, as well as connect you all to job opportunities. So before we get started, I want to let you know that you all are on mute. And if you have a question, chat it into the chat box, and I will ask the presenters. Additionally, all current CSULB students, if you could chat into the chat box your name and your student ID, that will be able to ensure we're able to track today's attendance. So again, if you're a CSULB current student, please chat your name and your ID into the chat box. So I wanted to give a big thank you to Norm Herron and Kristin, who are joining us today to discuss their experience in consulting and advice for breaking into the field. First, a little bit about our presenters. So Norm earned his MBA from CSULB with an emphasis in information systems. After working in the aviation, legal, and management consulting industry, he started his own firm, Pacific Technologies, in 2015. Through his education and experience, he combines proven strategies and practical real-world expertise to create customized solutions. And Kristin has a master's in industrial engineers and holds an MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management. She worked for corporations for 10 years prior to starting her own consulting firm. Kristin serves businesses to improve workflow processes with implement technology and increase productivity. She works in complex environments with cross-functional teams to develop and implement streamlined solutions, often involving technology. Her corporate experiences range from international assignments in Sweden for Volvo to Silicon Valley for Ernst & Young and Apple. In person and virtually, Kristin currently consults business leaders and organizations focused on making good companies better. So again, I'm going to get started with a couple of questions. And if you have any questions, you can chat them into the chat box and I'll be sure to ask the presenters. So thank you again, Kristin and Norm, for being here. I know that I gave the students a little bit of your bio, but maybe you could just, in your own words, tell them about yourself and just how you got started your career in consulting.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for having us here tonight. It's really fun to be using this platform. I've been using this for quite some time, not just starting now with the current situation. So welcome, everyone. My background, I always had a passion to go abroad, and finally, between my sophomore and junior year in college, I studied for a semester in Sweden, and that's what led me to go to Volvo. And it seems like having the corporate experience right out of college gave me some legs to move into more positions. But I always had this inner idea that I want to be a consultant. So it was after my master's degree that Ernst & Young was kind of what popped up for me. And I am so grateful that I applied myself to a large corporate consulting firm in that way before branching out on my own, because the lessons of working in a large corporation with consulting were really valuable to me. So I think that's kind of my passion and my path, and I'll leave it to Norm.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, my path was a little bit different. I earned my MBA at Cal State Long Beach, and I was in the legal industry, and I was getting a little restless, and I wanted a new challenge, and I was approached by a consulting firm, and they said, hey, why don't you come work for us? And after having a dialogue with the principal of the firm and exploring it, I decided to work for that firm. And I was there about 3 or 4 years, and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it because it provided me the opportunity to work in many different industries. And when that opportunity ended, I started my own firm. So I really I really enjoyed the challenges working with diverse workforces. And so I kind of started my mid-career. And now that I'm in my role, I would never go back.
Definitely. So you bring diverse experiences. Kristin kind of starting out in more of that, consulting environment that you think of, and then Norm, had a whole career and then started your own consulting firm.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, can you tell me just a little bit about your knowledge of the different types of consulting environments that are available to students?
So again, I think as we just kind of already shared, there are the large, what is it now, Big 5, Big 6 consulting firms. The one thing that I want to say there is there are now larger firms like one called Slalom that is more focused on people who want to stay in one area. I was recently having a discussion with a career coach who was sharing with me that if you see Slalom on a resume, then it kind of, that person doesn't want to travel too much. And she was sharing how she loves to travel. So she would opt out of that type of company and would stay with the other companies where one of the things is travel. Probably 70 to 90% of your time you're on the road, flying here, flying there. So that's the environment when it comes to the large corporations and working in consulting that way. And I think I'll just pass it to Norm as far as having your own business and working from that standpoint, because I think I'd share the same thing he would. So why don't you take over with that, Norm?
Yeah, well, thank you. I think, on the student side, I think that from my experience, there would be more opportunity for, the MBA student, because most of the consultants I interact with, maybe they're co-vendors on projects, is they're bringing some experience and acumen with them. So when they're joining a firm, they have that background. Maybe they're a subject matter expert, or they have some experience or some skills that they've learned through their education. And so, in Kristin's example, she had the opportunity to start out of college, whether it be undergrad or graduate. But from my experience, the consultants have been in their field for some time, and they're bringing some experience and background with them. And also on the consulting side too, it's about the relationships and introducing consultants and other vendors to try to solve a project or solution for a specific customer.
Very nice. And again, students, if you and alumni, if you have any questions, please chat them into the chat box, and I'll be sure to ask the presenters. So, so seeing that you've been in different consulting environments, maybe you could talk a little bit about both of these to the next question. But what does a typical day look like for in your position? And what aspects of the position do you really enjoy the most? And what are the most challenging?
So for me, I'll speak again to the large consulting. I do, 10 years I was in corporate. The last 20 years I've actually been working on my own. But I think the best way for us to cover all of it is for me to stay focused on the corporate side. So the day in the life of a corporate consultant is typically being on a site you haven't been. It's typically getting your feet on the ground, understanding who the key players are that you're working with, what exactly is your role on this project, who are the teammates, who are the people at the organization, both the consulting organization and the client, that matter most, that have the most influence on what the project is about. So a lot of the time is spent actually understanding the scope of the project and your specific part of it, and negotiating and navigating your way around what you're bringing to the project, what other people are already handling, and not stepping on someone else's toes, and stepping up where you can step up. And one of the things I'd like to share is that even though it's a large operation, there are many people there, and it seems like maybe especially as you're starting out, that the senior managers or partners or whomever are deciding what the next project is. one of the most important parts of the role is to identify next opportunities. So I found myself always seeing, well, if we're doing this, this needs to be done next. And I even, after leaving Ernst & Young, a friend who was still there, he said, you know, they still bring up your name because you were so good at seeing that next opportunity. So that's a key role that that's not really shared too often, is how important it is. You're asking about the parts that I enjoyed. I loved working with the people in the corporation that I was supporting, that I was moving something forward for them. I was really involved in helping them make a change that was making their life, their project, their workday easier in some way. It was really, so the type of consulting I was doing, even though it's Ernst & Young, a lot of people think that is finance. I was working on supply chain management technology implementations. So a lot of times it was understanding how to get away from an Excel spreadsheet and get onto an SAP database or another technology like that. So working with the rows and the columns and the data and the understanding exactly how the new system works, and really guiding and helping a client be comfortable that, you know, they don't have a choice. So that change management has always been part, no matter what, I think no matter what consulting role you have, change management, being able to work with others is a huge part of consulting. And for myself, that's the part I love the most. I love to go home after a day and feel like, wow, we got something done with, and it was fun. There was, you know, there are always the challenges here and there, probably in every week, but on a daily basis, for the most part, it was enjoyable. The part that I liked least was my own administrative duties that I had to report my time and my expenses and log all those things. I mean, today in the app world, if you just keep your app going and you put it in there every day as you're doing things, then it's not a hassle. But back in the day when I was there, it was, you know, some system I had to go into, and then I had to log every, you know, 3 hours I worked on this, and then I did that, and I drove here, and I was in miles, and it was like another 2-hour project I would have in my week somewhere. So, you know, quite frankly, that was the part. That and also on the larger projects, sometimes feeling like, man, I have such a little tiny part. I wish I could do more. Like seeing all the politics and only being able to do so much. And even that woman I was speaking with the other day, she was sharing, because she's at Accenture. So I've spoken with somebody recently, and she's like, yeah, you know, there's still all the client, the consulting company, and it's just that continuous navigation within that you just have to decide you're ready for it and just go moment by moment. So, all right, Norm, over to you.
Okay. So I'll answer it in two parts. And the first part about my day would be similar to Kristin's when I was working at the consulting firm, where part I kind of enjoyed the most was working with other people on the project, because together you will come up with solutions. And probably the worst part was some of the people in the project, because people can be great or they can be a pain. And so there were often strong personalities, maybe with the client itself or within the team that were on the project. And also some challenges, even when it, you know, Kristin referred to the admin part of it. We'd often be a sub to a sub, and maybe the sub above us, they'd have their own systems for entering time or mileage, and you have to, you know, figure all that out. But most of the day would be, you know, working with people, with either peers in my team or maybe on some sub teams, and meet with them and try to solve solutions on the project line. And then my current role as business owner, I'm probably spending maybe a quarter of my day being a kind of a quote consultant. The other day, I'm actually trying to run my business, which is the whole finance, accounting, and trying to keep staff running. So the consultant part kind of shrinks. So I'm actually dealing with customers and clients, which I really love. I love talking to new customers and clients about some of the challenges and what are some ways that we can maybe reduce costs for them, and how technology can help kind of solve some of their business problems. So I mean, we all have admin in our life, whatever that admin might be, whether it's your own checkbook or financing, and those things carry over. But there's always the parts that are rewarding when you when you actually solve a problem or some other obstacle that comes up.
Awesome, thank you. And we have some questions from the audience. So is there a website that you know of that's best geared towards finding a consulting firm which suits an individual's niche skills? For example, someone with 10 plus years in product management, do you know where they could go to find a consulting firm that would be interested in their experience?
What I would suggest with project management is looking at the PMP certification, the project management certification site, and kind of going down that path, either putting that in as your search, consulting, project management consulting. I don't know that there's one specific site that's going to identify all the different firms, but I think that what's most important if you're looking to get into that type of work is to have the certification. And I think in the process of the certification, and then on the, having the certification, the resources that would be available to map you to consulting firms that would use those type of skills. That's a highly sought after certification to have in addition to any college degree. That would be my recommendation with that specific set of experience.
Yep.
And then I'm not sure if you'll know this, or maybe you can speak in generalities, but do you know what the average starting salary of a consultant is? And, or maybe, what does salary look like if you're in kind of a big stick kind of consulting environment versus owning your own consulting business?
So when it comes to the salaries, the best place to research is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has salary data that's up to date. So especially with the current situation, I don't know what's happening. I can just share that my friend that's in one of the big consulting firms just shared with me that they just took a 15 to 20% pay cut based on current scenarios. So I wouldn't want to quote anything because I think things are changing really, really rapidly. Experience from being in business for myself and my own consulting, whatever you're brave enough to ask for, you'll get. It's kind of the way it goes. And what you're comfortable with, that'll be attracted to you. And I'd like Norm to speak to that for himself.
Yeah, I mean, income as an independent consultant can vary wildly, because I know a consultant who's running 2 full-time projects right now, and she's making really, really good money, but then she may not have something for 3-4 months. So it's a tough challenge to try to manage your own bandwidth. And oftentimes when you're working with customers, you can kind of gauge what they've paid in the past for a project, so you can price yours accordingly. It's a tough nuance to try to not price too high, but also price too low. And there's different, it could be flat rate, it could be hourly. So yeah, it's tough. It really varies widely.
Yeah, so
I would like to chime in about what Norm just said about hourly and flat rate. My recommendation is always charge by the project rather than hourly, but you may have to do hourly to get going, and it again depends on your comfort level. But as much as possible, charge by the project. What is the scope of the project and how much is the total package, and then whatever, half up front and half whatever, however you want to split the payments, or all of it up front, whatever. But it is, I find, a lot less haggling than trying to deal with hours and what you do for every hour and the penny pitching. And maybe Norm, you can speak a little bit to that and how clients are with, even though you set a rate, how they can.
Yeah, I would add, and we've had this happen to us too, is if you're going to do a flat rate, you need to have a very defined scope of work, because there's, scope creep is that you think you're going to provide X and they want X, Y, and Z. And so they have a very clear definition of what that is and have it in writing. You might have an understanding, maybe your contact is a director and they're expecting X, and the VP comes in and says, I wanted Y. And the VP wasn't part of your discussion or part of your contract. So it's very clear that you're, that in any type of documentation, a contract, in writing defines what your scope is, because you can handle services, but it'll take extra time and extra fees for that too.
And it's not that you don't have to keep track of your hours and what you're doing. It's just a better way to write the contract, if I can just state that too. You always want to keep track of your time. You always want to have that onus of that admin part for yourself to really show the value somewhere. You don't have to turn it over necessarily, but it holds you in authenticity for what you're doing. So, yeah.
Great. Well, just so you know, we have a lot of student questions coming in. So a lot of them are going to be off the cusp, but they're all great questions. So
Sure.
How do you find your niche and ensure that it has valuable to your customer base? So I think this is more if you're kind of going out on your own and providing consulting, like how do you kind of find out like what niche area you should be consulting in?
I think, yeah, go ahead, Norm. The most is really start with your experience. Start with, what you have experience in is going to be your strongest niche. And then you map that. So here's one of the things that happens for me, for example. What I am really good at is being an industrial engineer. Unfortunately, the term industrial engineer is kind of like outdated. So what I find is I have to call myself a business analyst. So my niche becomes business analyst, even though I don't even know, what that would look like for me to get certified or whatever. But I know that what I do as industrial engineer, when I see someone wanting a business analyst, they're saying, oh, we want current state, future state, mapping this, doing that. I'm like, that's what I do, but I do it under, a different title. So honestly, it's a constant reviewing what is being asked and then stating it back in the terms that they want and knowing that you can fulfill it. And that the part about the niche is just being in the flow with whatever the current lingo is. The alphabet soup of the world of consulting. Yeah.
Yeah, and then to add to Kristin, and we're going to reiterate this probably throughout this session, is connect with people, keep in touch with people, find people who are in different industries, attend networking events. We have several coming up here, through the alumni group or through the MBA group, virtually and in person again when we can. But interact and talk with people and learn what business trends are. See which ones are increasing and which ones are decreasing.
Yeah, and I don't know if I feel like that's a real important point you brought up, Norm, and I definitely like this flow of answering questions, and I feel like this is a good time to share this point very strongly, and that is every one of my jobs, including Volvo, including Ernst & Young, including every independent consulting job, gig that I've had, has been from a referral. So most of the time, they never got to the point of my resume. It wasn't about my niche. I mean, I know what I do, and I know when I hear a problem that I can solve, and then I know how to state it back in the way that they're asking and let them know that I can handle it and get started. And that's the skill for consulting, for getting work as a consultant. Yep.
So referrals, relationships, networking is very important, whether you're at, a big firm or starting your own business overall. Okay. And this question is for Norm. What made you want to leave your formal job experience /line to go into consulting and starting your own consulting business?
So when I was with a medium-sized consulting firm, they're about 75 employees for about 3 years. And we were on a large project and the project went away and there wasn't someone like Kristin there to help us get the next project. So we had a bunch of people kind of on the bench. So they had to let a bunch of us go. And I was looking for, a job or wherever. And someone said, hey, Norm, why don't you start your own consulting firm? And then I was beginning to think about, do I want to do that? Can I start my own business? And then right then, someone I knew from a couple of years ago said, hey, I know someone that's looking for someone to do some consulting for them. And I said, sure. So they were like my launch customer for my business through a connection I had from several years ago. So it was an opportunity and an opening to try something different. And once I got that first launch customer to, you know, kind of to get a baseline, to get my organization structured, it'll launch from there.
So, Kristin, this is probably more a question for you, but like, what tends to be the culture, environment, values, how collaborations work of companies in this industry, or does it really vary depending upon the company that you're at?
I think the consulting culture is, from my experience, I think it's pretty much the same. It's what we talked about in the first question. It's really about the teams. The team's made up of people, and there are going to be people that are going to be easy for you to get along with. There are going to be some that aren't, and that's just the nature of life. And I think that you'll find that in every consulting firm, in every project you're on. This idea that the grass is greener if you go to the next place is not necessarily the truth. And at the same time, I think being open and available to an opportunity that you can move from one firm or one project to another and continue to refresh and upgrade your career and increase your pay, I think that's an important decision that each person gets to make for themselves. I think staying too long in any one firm, getting too comfortable, is a dangerous kind of slope that you want to kind of stay on top of your career too, and maybe push yourself to that next level that might be coming through for you. And I think that's kind of the culture of corporate work in general, but certainly for consulting.
Very dynamic, fast moving, sounds like.
Yeah.
So this gets a little bit back to one of the previous questions about kind of, you know, projects and how to basically, like, how do you go about valuing your time/work? What does that look like when you're kind of working with a client? Do
you want to go ahead with that, Norm?
No, I didn't quite understand. I'm sorry, my speaker was a little low.
So how do you value your time/work? So I guess, you know, how do you put a price on kind of what you're consulting about?
Well, why don't you go ahead, Kristin, while I think about a good answer.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So a lot of, so when I was with the big consulting firms, that wasn't my decision. So I'm going to speak from consulting on my own. And I really look at the company that's asking me to do a project for them. And typically my project is going to move that company forward. They're going to increase in revenue. So the return on investment with me depends on how much money the company is making now, how much they can afford. And it's really a kind of a sliding scale depending on how much they're asking of me and how large the company is and how much of a leap they want to take. So that's really how I do it. And I've worked with independent startup, you know, solopreneurs, and I've worked with organizations, including nonprofits, that had a training program together. And, you know, it varies in scale. It varies based on the scope and the scale of the project and the size of the company and the amount of, you know, revenue they're making and what they really want to do in moving forward. And that's also a dynamic to use to decide if you really want, you know, if to qualify a project as being something you want to take on or not. If it's too small, say no. If it's too big, say no. And we're at that sweet spot. And that's another way of finding that sweet spot, finding that niche. Do you work with solopreneurs, small business, medium business, or are you a consultant that goes in and works at a corporate level? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it's about providing value, because if the organization finds value in what we're doing, they're willing to pay for it because they'll get a benefit from it. I've had clients and projects where they're questioning what you're doing and the price behind it, and maybe that's just not a good fit. There's other clients, I've had actually clients offer to pay me more because it's brought so much value to to the company, or they'll add a second or third project, and they'll ensure that the price is high enough because it brings value to them. So I think it's really bringing value to the customer and make sure that the customer values in what we're doing for them.
So maybe you could share some examples of some of the type of customer problems you've solved in the past, or maybe what some of your consulting projects have looked like, just some concrete examples of what that looks like.
Yeah, I can give a fairly recent example with an organization that they had an online course platform. So they were running a program that they did the marketing for, they registered the students, and then they had about 30 experts that they were bringing in to teach the courses. And then the next iteration, they had recorded all those teachings. So the next time around, they were putting the recordings up, and then they were having the experts come in a little less. So it was a very dynamic project, and the company was just really moving through this. But one of the things they recognized was that there was something about, they didn't, and this is typical with me, they're like, we're not sure what the problem is, but we know we have a problem, and we're too overwhelmed to figure it out. So the part that they knew was there was something with the marketing group. Like they felt like they weren't sure what it was, redundancy, or just it seems like things weren't as flowing smoothly as it was. It seemed like there was too much work being done in that marketing department, and nobody that was in the department could see basically the forest through the trees. So that's what I love. And I have a friend who's a consultant, and he said it this way. He said, "Isn't it great, Kristin? We get to sit up in the seats and look down on the field, and we can see it all. It's so easy, And that is truly what I love about consulting. I get to come in with a fresh perspective, look at all the moving parts, and that's one of the keys, is making sure that I actually see all the moving parts. So you can imagine if it's an online company, nobody works in an office. They're all working. People were working in Colorado. They were working in Oregon. They were working, anyway, various different places. And it was international. So they had volunteers around the world too. And they were using Facebook. They were using Constant Contact. They were using Infusionsoft. And then they were like doubling up their data. They were porting a database from Constant Contact into Infusionsoft and back and forth, and then somebody was spending a time on the weekend to reconcile it. I mean, it was a mess. But all they knew was there was something. They didn't know what the mess was. So by interviewing everyone involved, everyone that I could get to, that I knew about, and that took some uncovering, because there was a web guy over here, and then there's somebody over there, like that database reconciliation. It took me probably 2 months in to even know that somebody was even doing that, because it was so behind the scenes and so like such a one-off thing. So identifying all the players and all the processes, and then seeing how they all fit together and where the overlaps, redundancies are, and then understanding in that case, and most of the cases, because I also, still work in technology, what's the best solution for this company? If we're going to get rid of something, what are we getting rid of? If we're going to go with something, and so in that case, then there was, should we go to Salesforce? This is really specific, right? Are we going to move over to Salesforce? Are we going to keep Infusionsoft? Or what about the Constant Contact? Is there something else? So it was understanding what's going on, and then looking at what possible solutions were, and then working with all the players, including, the guys in charge who weren't necessarily doing the activities, but mapping out a solution. In the end of the day, I think we saved 50% of the marketing work, cost, and labor by doing this project.
Have you come across where employees or management, you get pushback from them? They don't want to share information?
Yes,
or?
all the time, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, and it's a lot of personal work to once I recognize that, then I have to really get myself in the frame of being able to work with it and not take it personally. Yeah, and typically on that, one of the keys for me is to understand the dynamics of the players in the organization, the dynamics of the people on the team, and kind of understand who works together really well and leverage that to get the information that's needed for the whole project. Because I never have the intent of, you know, firing anyone or making anyone mad or cutting someone's work out or anything like that. My intention is always to make the whole thing smoother for everybody. Like, let's have more time to do other things than this kind of, you know, why are we taking so long on this when we could be doing other things? And on that project, there were a couple people like that, and it was a bit challenging. They didn't want to release, you know, the control they had with it and the way that they were doing it, right? Because they had to change if they were going to a new program. But in the end of the day, they moved to the new platform and had a lot smoother day. There was less. So I just hold, you know, just know that that's going to be the truth and keep going. And that same when I was with Ernst & Young, the Excel spreadsheets. Everyone loved to have their Excel spreadsheets because they knew they could fudge. They knew how easy it was to make the numbers whatever they wanted, and why the last thing they wanted was a system where, you know, once you put the number in, it's in and it propagates to everything and, you know, all that. But in the end of the day, there was a lot less work for them to use the larger system. Yeah.
Nice. Norm, do you have any examples of any projects that you've worked on that kind of showcase what consulting is all about?
Yeah, so my recent example, I'm working with a local engineering firm, and they had many different departments where they would have engineers that would design products, manufacturing would assemble it, then they would distribute and have a different team install this product, and they have customers all over the world, and it was completely dysfunctional. When customers would call in, the phone system wouldn't work right, and so what we did is we put in a VoIP phone system so calls could be routed and they can go to the right department. When they would send text to the field, they would have an app of the phone system so they can receive and make calls that were centralized through the firm. Then they would have engineers all over the world, and they would have to use their laptops to connect to the office to get information and drawings and so forth. And sometimes they were in China, so there were, you know, VPN security restrictions that we had to solve. But ultimately, you know, and just like Kristin was saying, we had to overcome a lot of internal obstacles. Even if a company is dysfunctional, some people are at least they're used to the dysfunction, and bringing in a whole new process is scary, and people kind of have their own protection over what their own little spreadsheet or what they're in charge of. But once we were able to kind of review and explain how we can consolidate, put some of these solutions in the cloud so that they're always available. Their office had constant power problems at their location, and when they lose power on the weekend, they wouldn't have access to email or access to these files, and these people are in different time zones. But putting many of these solutions in the cloud and training people on it, it made a huge difference. And also, many of these things cost less than what they're already paying. You know, their legacy phone system with old T1 circuits was worth more than their new phone system with all these cool features. So many times the technology costs, the ROI on it is almost, you know, it's really fast. So it was a really great project. And they referred me to another engineering firm that we're working in right now because it's about referrals and connections and you know, just pretty much just taking the same solution template and putting it someplace else. And then it's a lot easier to sell because you say, well, I use it at, you know, at this other client already, and you know the owner, and we're just going to do the same thing for you and your team.
So it sounds like, you know, with all the projects, they're very dynamic. You have to use critical thinking. You have to be very organized, as well as like have that change management, relationship building. So it sounds like there's a lot of skills that you're using on a day-to-day basis in this role, whether, you know, it is you're working at like an EY or your own firm as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of skills in making, and sometimes you need to bring in another resource, or maybe just say up front, it's not the right fit. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people, you know, they appreciate that you're being honest about what your skill set is or what your team's skill set is.
Yeah, so being upfront overall too. So this is more in owning your own consulting business, but in terms of getting customers, how important is negotiating and having sales related experience for a consulting firm? Are there ever times negotiations fall out in the consulting business?
Yeah, those things are.
Yeah, I think it does happen, but once you become established, I mean, I talked to a potential new client today, and the person that referred me in, they said, hey, Tom referred you, and Tom says you're great. I mean, having that referral connection gives you credibility and takes the negotiation part so much easier, because they're not someone you found on Yelp. You already have credibility for the person that referred you in. So I'm not sure the sales skills are as much as proving your value in what you're doing.
And the way I would answer that, I would say that the sales skills have been important on the, it's certainly as you get started, right? Because then you're not where Norma is saying, oh yeah, someone referred you and you're great and been there, done that, know what it costs, easy to claim how much it's worth and stick to it. But especially as you're getting going, one of the things that changed my life completely was, especially as an engineer, I'm very technical. So I think I have to know everything before I make a decision. But that's not how the sales cycle necessarily works. So understanding that, I'll go back to what I said earlier and just kind of make a finer point on that. Listening to what the potential client is saying. Understanding what problem they're having and what'll happen if they don't fix it is the key to selling. And the selling that you're doing is asking them, if you could solve that problem in their language, saying whatever that problem is, and really understanding how much that's worth to them. You may not ask it directly, how much is it worth, but you'll know by the pain. Like, if you don't solve that problem, how much money is that going to cost you in the next 5 years? Like, that's the kind of question you can ask. And then you use that back to say, so if you could solve that problem for this amount of money, you're ready to get started. I mean, you basically, I just shortchange and the what and the how and that's after they say yes to the sale. That's been something that's changed my life in being able to sell projects, as I think it's too often the case where the idea of selling is telling what I can do. And that, to me, doesn't actually make the difference in the sale. The sale is really understanding what their problem is and showing that I'm able to solve it for them and getting that yes, and then we'll figure out all the how. Not that I don't know it before I'm starting, but it's not important to state it. And sometimes stating it, that's when negotiations go sideways, because you overwhelm them with so much information and they're taking it on and then almost thinking they have to do it all, which is not the point. You're going to do all that for them, but in the conversation of telling them all those things, that they can like get hesitant on all that's possible. So yeah, sticking to what's the problem, what's it worth to them, and if I could solve it for you, are you ready? Like, that's my 1, 2, 3 on sales skills.
Thank you. So someone said, thank you for sharing your experiences. And do you have any advice or tips on how to gain more experience, at least in those essential skills that you talked about in this field as an undergrad student? For example, this student is a healthcare admin major and a graduating senior with plans to obtain a master's in public health. So what advice would you have for undergrads and grads just to gain skills that would be helpful in the consulting industry?
Again, my recommendation is, if consulting is a field you want to go into, use the card that you're a recent grad and look for the jobs with the larger firms. Look for the jobs with a firm and get a consulting job with a firm. Larger firm, medium-sized firm, any firm. get a job as a consultant and spend a couple years there, and just think of it as like another degree. Like you're getting your consulting degree, but you're getting paid to do it. And it's all new, and there's, okay, this, this quarter I have to deal with this, and, it's going to be new. You're going to be learning new. But after 2 years, you pretty much say, oh, okay, I kind of am in the groove of what it is to be a consultant. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, because I worked on a hospital implementation, and they used a Cerner for the patient information system, and they had a lot of specialist consultants, and some of them were fairly young and fresh out of school, so they came in with a specific skill set, but then they also learned how the other pieces worked in, and so they got more experience. So I would, looking for those larger medical support firms, and we all know medical is huge right now, so to really get field to go in, there's a lot of things that you can do. So I definitely look for those larger medical systems. A friend of mine, actually, he was in sales for payroll, and he's now working for Stryker and sales for medical. And it was a completely different industry, but this guy, he's really bright, has a great personality, and he can engage customers. And they hired him because of his skill set, not because he had a specific experience in that particular industry.
And the other thing I'd like to say about the firms is they're going to be a bit more. They're going to hold your hand and lead you through the path. If you go out on your own, as far as learning where to become a consultant on your own, I know that was kind of the question. So to get back to that, you can do trial by fire that way too. And if you are going to go that way, then my recommendation is think of yourself as an outsourced expert, and do that if you know that your niche, and you're really good at it, and you can sell your services. But otherwise, I would recommend going to consulting firm.
And speaking of those consulting firms, how do you feel like a student can stand out in an interview with a consulting organization? Because I do know they can be very tough and rigorous. And so what advice do you have for kind of tackling those consulting interviews?
So I think when it comes to interviewing, it's knowing that, it's knowing your stories. It's knowing that a story is the answer to every one of those if this, then what questions. Every single one of them is another story. So I would spend the time using that SAR format, situation, action, result. And if you need any information on that, you can look up online. I think one of the best places to go now is to look up what does it take to get hired with Amazon, for example, and they'll show you every single interview question and how to answer it. And that SAR process, they'll explain it. There's a lady that explains it, like there are 14 questions, and 5 or 10 of them are all, you answer it with this strategy. So you may have another acronym. The general gist is, in this situation, this is what was going on, this was the action I took, and this is the result. So going through your life and seeing those places, and if you don't have examples that are work related, that's okay too. You can have them from a project in school. And remember to bring in the personal. When it comes to consulting, just like we've talked about a lot of the change management is relating with and dealing with people. So it's not just the tactical, work product that you did, but it's how you interacted with the person that you're working for, and the people you're working with, and the client, or the so take in school you have yourself, you have your teammates, you have your professor, and all those are players. So those situations work really well because it's the same thing. It's the professor threw out this challenge, I had to work with this team, and these were the actions we took, and these were the results we got. I mean, you can just go over and over again throughout your projects, and just identify how they map to those questions that are pretty common.
Yeah, and at the Career Development Center, as well as through Graduate Business Career Services, we do mock interviews with students. So it's another way to practice the situation action result method that you were talking about.
And I think the key with consulting is if that's what you really want to do, just really understand that you are flexible, adaptable, ready to learn, know that no 2 days are the same, love to be in the middle of, I'm going to say chaos. If you're looking for a routine desk job, then don't even interview for consulting. But what I love about it is that it's not a routine job. Like that is, no thank you. So
if I can kind of add real quick too, the interview is about you as a person. Be engaging, be positive, be dynamic. I was at a firm and we were hiring someone to be a tech person. He was just out of college, and he had some pretty good tech skills. But we learned he was a part-time bartender. My boss says hire him because he has people skills. We ended up talking about being a bartender because there's lots of challenges in interacting with people, and he ended up being a great employee because he could interact with all kinds of different end users and dealing with conflict. So learning about his personal side and what some of his background is, not even related to what his field was, helped in the interview process, and it helped him just in his role.
Yeah, so it's all about your transferable skills, right? And that kind of relate to what they're looking for.
And one last thing I'll say about interviewing is always have something to ask at the end. Don't leave that, do you have a question for me? Don't leave that one blank. Don't say, no, I don't have any questions. Always have a question at the end and relate it back to something that you heard if you can, or come up with something that, have a go-to if nothing else comes through, but always have something to ask the interviewer at the end when they ask you that.
Definitely.
It shows that you're really interested. Otherwise, you're like, that's like a, forget it, we're not going to bring you back for a second interview. Kind of gate.
So if students are interested in consulting, are there any professional associations or professional development opportunities that you would recommend that students get involved with?
I think professional associations with whatever, type of industry or type of consulting, again, like we were talking before, if you want to get into project management, then I would really consider certifying as, become a certified project manager. If it's lean manufacturing, I would really scan the certifications and see which ones are being asked for on the types of positions you're looking for. And like for myself, there's a professional organization with industrial engineers. I think any type of professional organization you have with your undergrad. And again, Norm can speak to this, alumni and networking. The associations are great if you use them for networking. Anything that you do, it's about networking. So whether it's the industry, the associations, business networking groups, so those are the places I would go.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add to that too is, and any organizations that are within your specific field, and there's so many out there, there's different meetup groups where you can attend. So, yeah.
Perfect. So it's all about networking and kind of being, kind of knowing what your niche is, and then kind of further expanding from there, just to be able to kind of showcase that.
And one other thing is the online resources, LinkedIn. Connect. Go to your connections that know somebody that knows somebody. It's amazing how, if you're a second connection to somebody that's working for a firm that you want to work for, connect to the person you're connected to and see if you can not just connect blindly, but if you can be kind of, I see you know so-and-so and whatever, that kind of thing. And then there are groups on LinkedIn. Employers often look at your LinkedIn profile to see what your activity is. So maybe post something about the projects you've done in school, especially graduate school. Be interested in the organizations and the groups that are relevant with the type of work that you want to do. That all counts these days. Yeah.
And on LinkedIn, take time to update your profile. Look at other people's profiles. Make sure your profile picture is professional. I have a good friend of mine, you know, half of his picture, he's at a wedding, you can see his Dave's shoulder on there. You just kind of cut it off. So, you know, it needs to be professional. You know, have someone take the picture for you. But if you look at other people's pages, you'll see how, you know, ones that are very complete and detailed, post stuff, share information, connect with people. If your profile hasn't been adjusted in a couple of years, but your LinkedIn profile is your resume. You want that to be dynamic and engaging and no typos, and everything is there. And add things you're interested in, education, have it be as complete as possible.
Mm-hmm. And if you need help with your LinkedIn profile, that's something that Graduate Business Career Services as well as Career Development Center can help you with too. So. And
we have a webinar coming up for that, I believe, don't we, Michelle?
Yes, we do, and I'll promote that at the end. Yes, good thing that we have that coming. So, so as we're kind of wrapping up our session, and thank you again for sharing your experiences, you know, both within a big consulting as well as starting your own consulting firm. What advice would you have for someone that wants to break into the field? Maybe advice for breaking into one of those kind of big consulting firms, as well as advice on branching out on your own and starting your own consulting firm.
I'd say that my strongest advice as you're graduating and moving into whatever career you move into, whether it's consulting or if you're wanting to work for a company, really scanning your network and seeing who else is already working there, talk to others who might, just talk to everybody. And I want to just leave you with this example of how did my job happen. My graduate degree was in Arizona. I moved to San Francisco and I joined the Alumni group. So a friend that I met at the Alumni group said to me, oh, I'm looking to get into Ernst & Young. I've been interviewing for a while. Maybe you can, maybe it's something you're interested in. So it was at the time, like now is for certain firms, that they're hiring, because it's a boom for certain things now, even though others aren't. So I applied. He shared with me that there was a job opening. I applied, I was hired, and then I supported him. I referred him to actually get hired once I was hired. So it's just like you never know which way it's going to go, but it is definitely networking and staying persistent in knowing that it's possible. Don't give up. Just keep going. Everything's possible.
I agree. It's all about people. Last week I talked to my old boss. It was like 25 years ago. We still keep in touch, and another boss moved to Singapore, and we keep in touch. It's about people and connections, because especially today, it's so hard to be above the fray. But if someone refers you in, or it's just even having a group to be, someone changes jobs and hey, why did you change? Or maybe they change industries, and you can learn about their old industry and their new industry. So it's about, understanding what the environment is. I mean, after our current situation now with all of us doing, because of the virus and so forth, it's going to have profound changes on the workplace. And no one knows where that's going to happen, but by connecting with people, knowing how that's going to change, we all have to change and evolve with it.
Mm-hmm. And reach out and say yes when someone reaches out to you. Say yes for the conversation, because you just never know where it's going to go. You don't know at all where it's going to go. But if you don't have the conversation, then you know it's going nowhere. So yeah,
just be open to opportunities, especially in this time and everything going on. Just saying yes and being open overall. So, well, thank you, Norm and Kristin, for sharing your experiences and knowledge with us about consulting. Students, if you have any specific questions, Norm and Kristin have shared their email address as well. And if you don't mind, if you're able to fill out a webinar evaluation, letting us know what you thought. I'm going to be chatting that into the bit.ly into the chat box. So if you're able to click on that and to give us your feedback, and if there's any other webinars that you're looking for, we're always open to that. And then also, as Norm was mentioning, next week on Tuesday, April 14th at 5:45 p.m., we have a webinar from an alumni, Victoria, who is going to be talking about how to use LinkedIn effectively. So both Kristin and Norm were talking about, just about the importance of LinkedIn overall. So, and again, students, if you haven't already, please input your name and your student ID so we're able to track attendance for this. And again, thank you to Kristin and Norm for making yourself available. Any final words, Kristin and Norm?
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciated your questions. I think you're asking the right questions that are going to move you into getting what you're asking the right questions to move forward. So keep going, and just keep going. Just keep going, because there's plenty to do in this world. So just wish you all well, and that you find something that you enjoy.
I would just say be flexible and be ready to evolve.
Definitely good advice for right now.
And feel free to reach out, because we're here to answer further questions. So,
yeah.
Thank you.